The cargo ship Starlight Drifter moved through the empty space like a tired old whale swimming through a dark ocean. Captain Laura sat in her chair on the bridge and watched the stars pass by on the screen. They had just finished a delivery run to a mining colony and were heading home with empty cargo holds and light pockets. It was not the most exciting life, but it was honest work, and Laura liked it that way. Danny Cole, her first mate, sat at the navigation console and yawned loudly. He was a tall man with gray hair at his temples and tired eyes that had seen too many years in space. He had been with Laura since she bought this ship 10 years ago, and he knew her better than anyone else in the galaxy. "Quiet night," Danny said. "I almost missed the pirates." Laura smiled. "No, you do not." "You are right, I do not." The rest of the crew was scattered around the ship doing their usual tasks. Sam Porter, the engineer, was down in the engine room talking to the machines like they were his children. Hudson, the medic, was in her small medical bay organizing supplies that did not need organizing. Greg Mason, the pilot, was sleeping in his quarters after a long shift. And Nora Fields, the member of their crew, was in the cargo hold doing inventory on nothing. It was a small crew for a ship this size, but they worked well together. They were not family by blood, but they had become family by choice, and that was often stronger. Laura was about to suggest they all get some rest when a soft beeping sound came from the communication console. Danny frowned and leaned forward to look at the screen. "That is strange," he said. "What is it?" "A signal very weak, not standard galactic code." Laura stood up and walked over to his station. The signal appeared as a small blinking dot on the screen, repeating in a pattern that seemed almost random. But the more she listened to the audio version, the more she heard something else in it. Desperation, fear, a cry for help that did not know the proper words. "It is a distress signal," Laura said. "Someone is in trouble." Danny shook his head slowly. "Captain, this sector is known for pirate activity. This could be a trap. They send fake signals to lure ships in, and then they attack." "I know. So we should ignore it and keep moving." Laura did not answer right away. She stared at the blinking dot and thought about all the times she had wished someone would come to help her when she was young and alone and scared. She had survived because eventually someone did. A stranger with no reason to care had stopped and helped her anyway. That stranger had changed her life. "We will investigate," she said finally, "but carefully." Danny sighed but did not argue. He knew that tone in her voice. When Laura made a decision, she did not change her mind easily. She pressed the intercom button. "All crew to the bridge, we have a situation." Within minutes everyone had gathered. Sam wiped oil from his hands with a dirty rag, looked alert and ready. Greg rubbed sleep from his eyes. Nora stood in the back with her arms crossed, watching quietly. Laura explained the signal and the risk. She told them they could vote on whether to investigate or not. It was how she ran her ship. Everyone had a voice. "I say we check it out," Sam said immediately. "Could be someone who really needs help." "Could be someone who wants to kill us and take our ship," Danny countered. "I agree with Sam," said. "I did not become a medic to ignore people in trouble." Greg shrugged. "I will fly wherever you tell me to fly, Captain." Everyone looked at Nora. She was quiet for a long moment, her dark eyes distant. Then she spoke. "I have been on the wrong end of being ignored before. I say we go." Laura nodded. "Then we go. Greg, take us to the signal source. Everyone else be ready for anything." The Starlight Drifter changed course and headed toward the weak signal. As they got closer, the signal grew stronger and they could finally see what was sending it. A small escape pod floated near an asteroid field, tumbling slowly through space. It was damaged and dark, with no lights visible through its tiny window. "Life signs?" Laura asked. Checked her scanner. "One, very faint. Body temperature is extremely low. Whoever is in there is dying." "Bring it in," Laura ordered. Sam and Danny went to the cargo bay to receive the pod. They used the mechanical arm to pull it inside, and the bay doors closed behind it. The pod was covered in frost, and when they opened it, a wave of cold air rushed out. Inside was a girl. She was not human. Her skin was pale blue, almost gray now, and her thin body was curled up in a ball trying to stay warm. She had large eyes that were closed and delicate features that looked almost fragile. She wore thin clothes that were not made for cold, and her lips had turned a dark purple color. "She is," said as she rushed forward with a thermal blanket. "They are cold-blooded. They need warmth to survive. She is freezing to death." They carried the girl to the medical bay as quickly as they could, worked fast, wrapping her in heated blankets and starting warm fluids through an IV. The rest of the crew stood in the doorway and watched with worried faces. "Will she live?" Laura asked. "I do not know yet," admitted. "She has been cold for a long time, maybe days. Her body is shutting down." Laura looked at the small alien girl lying on the medical bed. She looked so young, so helpless. Whatever had happened to her, she had been alone and afraid in that tiny pod, slowly freezing in the darkness of space. And somehow, against all odds, they had found her. "Fight," Laura whispered to the girl. "You are not alone anymore." For hours, worked to warm the girl's body slowly and carefully. Too fast could be just as dangerous as too slow. The crew took turns waiting outside the medical bay, none of them willing to go back to their normal tasks while a life hung in the balance. Finally, near midnight by ship time, the girl's eyes fluttered open. They were large and violet-colored, and they looked around the room with confusion and fear. When she saw the humans standing around her, she flinched and tried to move away, but she was too weak. "It is okay," said softly. "You are safe. We found your escape pod. We are trying to help you." The girl stared at them for a long moment. Her eyes moved from face to face, studying each human with a mix of terror and desperate hope. Her mouth opened, and she tried to speak, but her voice was barely a whisper. Laura moved closer and leaned down so she could hear. The girl spoke one word in broken galactic common. Just one word, but it carried all the weight of her fear and hope and desperation. "Please." The alien girl slept for most of the next day, stayed by her side, checking her temperature and heart rate every hour. The color was slowly returning to her skin, changing from gray back to a soft pale blue. She was getting stronger, but she was still very weak. Laura found herself returning to the medical bay again and again, standing in the doorway and watching the girl sleep. There was something about her that pulled at Laura's heart. Maybe it was how small she looked. Maybe it was how alone she must have felt in that cold, dark pod. Whatever it was, Laura could not stop thinking about her. On the second day, the girl woke up and stayed awake, helped her sit up and gave her warm broth to drink. The girl's hands shook as she held the cup, but she drank every drop like she had not eaten in days. She probably had not. "What is your name?" asked gently. The girl looked at her with those large violet eyes. She said. Her voice was soft and musical, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "That is a beautiful name. This is Captain Laura. You are on our ship, the Starlight Drifter. We found you in an escape pod." Nodded slowly. "I remember, I was so cold, I thought I was going to die." "You almost did," Laura said. "You were in that pod for a long time. What happened to you?" Eyes filled with tears, and she looked down at her hands. For a moment, Laura thought she would not answer. But then she began to speak, and her story came out in pieces like broken glass. She was from a small colony. Her parents were traders who traveled between worlds selling handmade crafts and artwork. They were not rich, but they were happy. 3 days ago, their transport ship was attacked by raiders while traveling through this sector. Whispered, and her whole body trembled at the word. Laura felt her stomach drop. They were one of the most brutal species in the galaxy. They were slave traders who captured people from weaker species and sold them to the highest bidder. They showed no mercy and feared no law. Crossing them meant death. "My father heard them coming," continued. "He put me in the escape pod and told me to hide. My mother said she loved me. Then they launched the pod, and I watched their ship get smaller and smaller until I could not see it anymore." Tears ran down her blue cheeks now. "They took my parents. They took them, and I do not know if they are alive or dead. I floated in that pod for 3 days. The heat stopped working on the first day. I tried to stay awake, but I was so cold. I thought no one would ever find me." Put her arm around the girl and held her while she cried. Laura stood there feeling helpless and angry at the same time. Angry at them for their cruelty. Angry at the galaxy for allowing such things to happen. And angry at herself for not knowing what to do. Later that day, Laura called a crew meeting in the common room, was resting again, and had given her something to help her sleep. The crew sat around the table with serious faces. Danny said flatly, "Of all the species in the galaxy, it had to be the—" "You know what they do to their prisoners," Sam said. "They sell them as slaves, or worse." "Her parents might already be dead," Danny added. "Or they might still be alive," argued. "We cannot just assume the worst." Laura rubbed her forehead. "I contacted a friend at Waypoint Station. She said a slaver ship was spotted heading toward the market 2 days ago. If parents are still alive, that is probably where they are being taken. The room went quiet. Everyone knew about the market. It was a place where criminals and slavers gathered to do their evil business. It was built into a hollowed asteroid in unclaimed space, beyond the reach of any law. Going there was dangerous. Trying to steal from there was suicide. "We are not seriously thinking about going there," Danny said. "Tell me we are not." "We are not," Laura said. "We are going to take to a safe station where her people can care for her. That is the responsible thing to do." Danny relaxed a little. "Good. I know it is hard, but we cannot save everyone. We are just a cargo ship with 6 people. We are not soldiers or heroes." Nora, who had been silent until now, suddenly spoke up. "They destroyed my home colony when I was 12. They killed my parents and my brother. I hid in a basement for 2 days before rescue ships came." She looked at Laura with hard eyes. "If there is even a chance that girls' parents are alive, we should try to save them." "And get ourselves killed in the process?" Danny asked. "Some things are worth dying for." The argument went back and forth for an hour. Danny made practical points about their limited weapons and small crew, talked about moral duty and the value of life. Sam said he could not sleep at night if they abandoned a child's family. Greg stayed quiet and waited for orders like he always did. Finally, Laura raised her hand, and everyone stopped talking. "I hear all of you," she said. "Danny is right that this is dangerous, maybe too dangerous, but I keep thinking about that girl lying in our medical bay. She believed she was going to die alone in the cold, and then we found her. We gave her hope. Now she is asking us to help her find her parents." She paused and looked at each of her crew members. "I am not going to force anyone to risk their life. This will be voluntary, but I cannot walk away from this. I cannot look that girl in the eyes and tell her that her parents are not worth the risk." The room was silent for a long moment. Then spoke "I am with you." "Me too," Sam said. "You know I am in," Nora added. Greg shrugged. "I said I would fly wherever you tell me. That has not changed." Everyone looked at Danny. He stared at Laura for a long time, his face unreadable. Then he let out a heavy sigh and shook his head. "You are going to get us all killed, Laura. You know that, right?" "Probably." "Fine, I am in too. Someone has to keep you out of trouble." Laura felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them away. "Thank you, all of you." Later that night, Laura went to check on and found her awake. The girl looked at her with those big violet eyes full of questions and fear. "My crew and I have decided to help you," Laura said. "We are going to try to find your parents." Stared at her in disbelief. "But they are dangerous. You could die." "Yes, we could." "Then why would you help me? You do not know me. You do not owe me anything." Laura sat down on the edge of the bed and smiled softly. "My mother once told me that the measure of a person is not what they do when it is easy. It is what they do when it is hard. Helping you is hard. That is exactly why we have to do it." Eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were not tears of sadness. "My mother told me humans were different from other species. She said humans protect the weak even when it costs them. I did not believe her. I thought it was just a story." "It is not a story," Laura said. "It is who we are." For the first time since they found her, smiled. The Starlight Drifter changed course and headed toward the market. The journey would take 2 days, and Laura used every hour to plan their approach. They could not simply fly in and start shooting. There were too strong and too many. They needed to be smart. Danny spread star charts across the table in the common room while the others gathered around. He pointed to a dark spot on the map where no official stations existed. "The market is built into an asteroid called Black Stone. It has been there for almost 50 years, and no one has ever been able to shut it down. The criminals who run it pay off anyone who might cause trouble." "How do we get in?" Sam asked. "That is the easy part. The market welcomes anyone with money. They do not ask questions about where you come from or what you want. The hard part is getting out alive if things go wrong." Laura studied the map carefully. "We need to look like we belong there. If we walk in looking like honest cargo haulers, we will attract attention." "I can help with that," Nora said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small data chip. "Before I joined your crew, I did some work in the gray areas of the law. I have fake identification codes that will make our ship look like a smuggler vessel. It should get us through the front door." Danny raised an eyebrow. "You never mentioned that before." "You never asked." Laura took the chip and nodded. Good, what about weapons? Sam cleared his throat. I might have a few extra things hidden in the engine room. Nothing military grade, but enough to defend ourselves if we need to. Why do you have weapons hidden in my engine room? Sam shrugged. I like to be prepared. Over the next 2 days, the crew prepared for the mission. Sam pulled out his hidden weapons and made sure everyone knew how to use them, packed medical supplies in case anyone got hurt. Greg studied the approach routes to the asteroid so he could fly them in and out as quickly as possible. Danny and Nora worked on their cover story. Watched all of this from her bed in the medical bay. Had told her to rest, but she could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her parents being dragged away by the. She heard her mother's voice telling her to be brave. She felt the cold of the escape pod seeping into her bones. On the second day, she got out of bed and walked slowly to the common room. The crew stopped what they were doing and looked at her with surprise. You should be resting, said. I want to help, replied. They are my parents, I cannot just lie there and do nothing. Laura shook her head. You are too young and too weak. When we get to the market, you will stay on the ship with Greg. If anything goes wrong, he will fly you to safety. But I want to come with you. I know you do, but the best way you can help is by staying safe. Your parents would want that. Wanted to argue, but she saw the firm look in Laura's eyes and knew it would be useless. She nodded slowly and sat down at the table. Can you at least tell me what my parents look like? Laura asked. We have never met them. His face softened and a small smile crossed her lips. My father's name is. He is tall for a with dark blue skin and silver eyes. He has a scar on his left cheek from an accident when he was young. He is kind and gentle and he tells the worst jokes, but he always makes me laugh. She paused to wipe her eyes. My mother's name is Myra. She has light blue skin like mine and purple eyes. She loves to sing, and her voice is the most beautiful sound I have ever heard. She always told me stories about the different species in the galaxy. Humans were her favorite. She said humans were the most interesting because they were full of surprises. She sounds wonderful, said softly. She is, they both are, looked at Laura with desperate hope in her eyes. Please bring them back to me. I will do everything I can, Laura promised. That is all I can offer. The Starlight Drifter dropped out of faster-than-light travel near the asteroid field where the market was hidden. Greg guided the ship carefully through the floating rocks, following a path that only experienced pilots would know. The asteroid called Black Stone loomed ahead, a massive chunk of dark rock with lights glowing from thousands of windows and docking ports. There it is, Danny said grimly, the worst place in the galaxy. Laura stared at the station and felt a chill run down her spine. This was real now. They were actually doing this. In a few hours, they would either save 2 innocent people or die trying. Nora transmitted the fake identification codes, and after a tense minute of waiting, they received permission to dock. Greg eased the ship into one of the smaller docking bays, away from the main entrances where security was heaviest. The crew gathered in the cargo bay for a final briefing. Laura looked at each of them and felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. These people were risking their lives for strangers they had never met, all because a frightened girl had asked for help. She could not have asked for a better crew. Here is the plan, she said. Danny, Nora, and I will go into the market and find the slaver ship. Sam will stay near the ship and create a distraction when we give the signal. We'll be ready to treat any injuries when we get back. Greg will keep the engines warm and be ready to leave immediately. What kind of distraction? Sam asked. Something loud and chaotic. A fire alarm, an explosion, whatever you can manage. We need the guards to leave their posts so we can get to the prisoners. Sam grinned. I can do loud and chaotic. Laura turned to, who stood at the edge of the group looking small and scared. Stay with Greg no matter what happens. If we are not back in 2 hours, he will take you to Waypoint Station. My friend there will make sure you are safe. His eyes filled with tears. Thank you for everything. Laura pulled her into a gentle hug. Thank us when your parents are safe. The cargo bay doors opened, and the smell of the market hit them like a wave. It was a mix of smoke, sweat, and something rotten underneath it all. The sounds of 1,000 voices echoed through the tunnels, speaking languages from across the galaxy. Somewhere in the distance, someone screamed. Laura took a deep breath and stepped forward. Danny and Nora followed close behind. Stay sharp, Laura whispered, and whatever you see in there, do not react. We are just visitors looking to do business, nothing more. They walked into the darkness of the market, and the lights of their ship disappeared behind them. Somewhere in this terrible place, two frightened were waiting to be saved. Laura just hoped they were not already too late. The market was everything Laura had feared and worse. The tunnels carved into the asteroid were packed with creatures from dozens of species, all of them here to buy or sell things that decent people would never touch. Weapons, drugs, stolen cargo, and worst of all, living beings. Laura kept her face blank as she walked past a row of cages where prisoners sat with empty eyes. Some were young, some were old, and all of them had given up hope. She wanted to free them all, but she knew that was impossible. Today, she could only save two. Danny walked on her left side, his hand resting near the hidden weapon under his jacket. Nora was on her right, her eyes scanning every face they passed. Both of them looked calm, but Laura knew they were coiled tight and ready for trouble. "The ships usually dock in the lower levels," Nora whispered. "That is where they keep their cargo until the auctions." "Cargo?" Danny muttered. "You mean people." "I mean cargo. That is what they call them. If we want to blend in, we need to think like them." They made their way down through the winding tunnels, passing gambling halls and drug dens and places that sold pleasures Laura did not want to think about. The deeper they went, the darker it got, and the fewer lights there were. This was where the serious criminals did their business, away from prying eyes. Finally, they reached the lower docking level. The smell was worse here, a mix of engine fuel and fear. Several ships were parked in the massive cavern, but one stood out from the rest. It was large and ugly, covered in spikes and painted with symbols that made Laura's stomach turn. The slaver ship. Two guards stood at the entrance ramp, both of them. They were tall and muscular, with gray, scaly skin and yellow eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light. Their teeth were sharp, and their claws looked like they could tear through metal. They carried large weapons that hummed with energy. "Those are Class 7 pulse rifles," Danny whispered. "One hit and you are dead." "Then we do not get hit," Laura replied. They found a hiding spot behind some cargo containers and watched the ship for an hour, counting guards and nodding their patrol patterns. There were 6 guards total, with 2 always at the entrance and 4 rotating around the ship. The prisoners were probably being held in the cargo bay at the back. "We cannot fight 6, Danny said. "Even if we surprised them, we would lose." "That is why we need Sam's distraction," Laura said. She pressed the communicator in her ear. "Sam, are you in position?" Sam's voice crackled back. "Ready and waiting, just say the word." "Give us 10 minutes to get closer, then light it up." "Copy that." Laura, Danny, and Nora moved through the shadows, getting as close to the ship as they dared. They found another hiding spot behind a stack of fuel containers, just 20 meters from the entrance ramp. From here, they could see the guards clearly. The minutes ticked by slowly. Laura's heart was pounding so hard she was sure the guards could hear it. She thought about waiting on the ship, hopping and praying that her parents would come back to her. She thought about Myra, probably terrified and wondering if anyone would ever come to save them. Then the explosion came. It was not just one explosion, but a chain of them, starting somewhere in the upper levels and rolling down through the tunnels like thunder. Alarms began to wail, and red lights flashed everywhere. People started screaming and running in all directions. The guards looked at each other in confusion. One of them spoke into a communicator, asking what was happening. A moment later, 4 of them ran off toward the chaos, leaving only 2 at the entrance. "Now," Laura whispered. They moved fast. Nora reached the first guard before he even knew she was there, driving a knife into his throat with practiced skill. Danny tackled the second guard and they rolled on the ground, fighting for control of the pulse rifle. Laura helped him, hitting the guard in the head with the butt of her own weapon until he stopped moving. "Go," Danny gasped, climbing to his feet. "I will watch the entrance." Laura and Nora ran up the ramp and into the ship. The inside was dark and smelled like blood and worse things. They moved through the narrow corridors, checking every room until they found the cargo bay. The door was locked with an electronic seal. Nora pulled out a small device and pressed it against the lock. After a few seconds, there was a click and the door slid open. Inside the cargo bay, a dozen prisoners were chained to the walls. Most of them were species Laura did not recognize, but 2 of them were. A tall male with dark blue skin and a scar on his cheek. A female with light blue skin and purple eyes. And Myra. They looked up with fear when the door opened, expecting their captors. But when they saw Laura and Nora, their expressions changed to confusion and then desperate hope. We are here to rescue you, Laura said quickly. Your daughter sent us. Myra let out a sob. Is alive, she is safe. She is on our ship waiting for you, but we need to move fast. Nora worked on the chains while Laura kept watch at the door. One by one, the prisoners were freed. Laura wanted to take all of them, but she knew they did not have time. She told the others to run and hide in the chaos, promising that she would send help if she could. Grabbed her arm as she turned to leave. Why are you doing this? You do not know us, you owe us nothing. Your daughter asked for help, Laura said simply. That was enough. They ran back through the ship and down the ramp. Danny was still at the entrance, holding his position. But as they emerged, they saw something that made Laura's blood run cold. A commander was walking toward them with 3 guards behind him. He was larger than the others, with scars covering his face and a look of pure hatred in his yellow eyes. Humans, he growled. I should have known. Your kind is always meddling where you do not belong. Nora's whole body went rigid. Laura saw recognition in her eyes and something else. Rage. That is him, Nora whispered. That is the one who led the attack on my colony. Before Laura could stop her, Nora charged at the commander with a scream of fury. The guards raised their weapons, but Nora was too fast. She ducked under their fire and crashed into the commander, driving him to the ground. Laura and Danny opened fire on the guards, taking down 2 of them before the 3rd returned fire. A pulse blast hit Danny in the shoulder, and he fell with a cry of pain. Laura shot the last guard and ran to help him. Behind her, she heard the sounds of a brutal fight. When she turned around, she saw Nora standing over the dead body of the commander, covered in blood and breathing hard. There were tears running down her face. For my family, Nora said quietly. We need to go, Laura said, now. They half-carried Danny through the chaos of the market, with helping support his weight. The alarms were still blaring, and smoke filled the tunnels. People were running everywhere, and no one paid attention to their little group. By some miracle, they made it back to the Starlight Drifter. Greg had the engines running and the cargo bay doors open. They stumbled inside, and the doors closed behind them. Go, Laura shouted. Get us out of here. The ship lifted off and shot out of the docking bay, weaving through the asteroid field at dangerous speed. Behind them, the market shrank until it was just another dark spot among the stars. In the cargo bay, came running from the corridor. When she saw her parents, she let out a cry of joy and threw herself into their arms. The 3 held each other and wept, their bodies glowing slightly with the warmth of their reunion. Laura watched them with tears in her own eyes. They had done it. Against all odds, they had actually done it. Danny groaned from the floor where was already working on his wound. Please tell me we are never doing that again. Laura smiled despite everything, no promises. The Starlight Drifter flew through the quiet darkness of space, far away from the market and its horrors. In the medical bay, worked on Danny's shoulder wound with steady hands. The pulse blast had done serious damage but was good at her job. He would heal. You are lucky, told him. A few inches to the right and it would have hit your heart. Danny managed a weak smile. Lucky is my middle name. Your middle name is Eugene. Do not tell anyone. In the common room, the rest of the crew gathered with their guests, sat between her parents, holding their hands like she would never let go. Her skin had returned to its healthy blue color, and her eyes were bright with happiness. She looked like a completely different girl from the one they had found freezing in that escape pod. And Myra still looked weak from their time in captivity, but they were alive and free, and that was all that mattered. Had given them warm food and blankets, and the color was slowly returning to their faces. We do not have the words to thank you, said, his voice thick with emotion. What you did for us and for our daughter is beyond anything we could have expected from strangers. Laura shook her head. We did what anyone should do. But that is not true, Myra said softly. We have traveled across the galaxy for many years. We have met hundreds of species. Most of them would not have stopped for a distress signal in dangerous space. Most of them would not have taken in a freezing child, and none of them would have risked their lives to rescue people they had never met. She reached out and took Laura's hand in hers. Her skin was cool and smooth, but her grip was strong. Humans have a reputation in the galaxy. Some species think you are violent and unpredictable. Others think you are weak because you are so young among the stars. But I have always believed that humans are something special, something the galaxy needs. What is that? Laura asked. Hope, Myra said simply. You give people hope. You see suffering and you cannot turn away from it. You see injustice and you must fight against it. Other species talk about survival and logic and the cold equations of the universe. But humans talk about right and wrong, good and evil. You believe that things can be better and you are willing to sacrifice to make it so. Laura felt tears prick her eyes. She thought about all the hard choices she had made in her life, all the times she had wondered if she was doing the right thing. To hear someone say that it mattered, that it meant something, was overwhelming. "We are just a cargo ship," she said quietly. "We are not heroes." "You are to us," said. "You saved my life. You saved my family. That makes you heroes in my eyes forever." Sam cleared his throat awkwardly. "So what happens now? Where will you go?" Answered, "There is a safe haven on the other side of this sector, a place where our people gather when they have nowhere else to go. We have family there who will take us in." "We can take you there," Laura offered. "It is the least we can do." The journey to the safe haven took 3 days. During that time, the crew of the Starlight Drifter got to know their guests better, told stories about his travels and made terrible jokes that somehow always got a laugh. Myra sang songs in the language, and her voice was exactly as beautiful as had described, and followed the crew members around like a curious shadow, asking questions about humans and their strange customs. She was especially interested in watching her treat Danny's wound and asking about human medicine. She spent hours in the engine room with Sam, learning how the ship worked. She practiced flying in the simulator with Greg and was surprisingly good at it. She even got Danny to smile despite his pain, which everyone agreed was a miracle. But it was Laura who spent the most time with. They would sit in the common room late at night and talk about everything and nothing, asked about Earth and human history and what it was like to grow up there. Laura told her about her childhood, about losing her parents young, about the stranger who had saved her and changed her life. "That is why you stopped for me," said one night, "because someone stopped for you." "Maybe," Laura admitted. "Or maybe I just could not stand the thought of leaving someone alone in the cold." On the last day of the journey, came to Laura with something in her hands. It was a small crystal pendant on a delicate chain. The crystal glowed faintly with an inner light, shifting through colors like a tiny captured rainbow. "This is a friendship crystal," explained. "Among my people, it is the highest gift we can give. It means that the bond between us will last forever, across time and space and even death. I want you to have it." Laura took the pendant with trembling hands. "I cannot accept this. It is too precious." "You saved my family. There is nothing more precious than that." Helped her put on the necklace and the crystal settled against Laura's chest, warm and comforting. "Now a part of my people will always be with you, and a part of you will always be with us." The safe haven was a beautiful station, all curved lines and soft lights and warm colors. Hundreds of lived there, and they came out to greet the Starlight Drifter with cheers and songs. Word had already spread about what the human crew had done, and they were welcomed as honored guests. The goodbye was harder than Laura had expected. She had only known these people for a few days, but they had become part of her heart somehow. Shook her hand and thanked her again, his silver eyes wet with tears. Myra hugged her tight and whispered blessings in her ear, and held on to her for a long time, her small body shaking with sobs. "I will never forget you," she said. "I will tell everyone I meet about the humans who saved us. I will tell them that humans are not just strong. Humans are kind." Laura kissed her forehead gently. "Take care of yourself, little one, and take care of your parents." "I will, I promise." The Starlight Drifter pulled away from the station and set course for home. The crew gathered in the common room, exhausted but content. Danny's arm was in a sling, and everyone had cuts and bruises, but they were alive and together. "So," Sam said, breaking the silence, "what now?" Laura looked out the window at the endless stars. She thought about everything they had been through, all the danger and fear and pain. She thought about Smile and Myra's songs and the weight of the crystal pendant against her chest. "I have been thinking," she said slowly. "We have been hauling cargo for 10 years. It pays the bills, but it does not mean much. What we did this week, saving those people, that meant something. Maybe we should do more of that." Danny groaned. "I knew you were going to say that. No one is forcing you to stay." "As if I would ever leave." He sighed dramatically. "Fine, but if we are going to be heroes, we need better weapons and better armor and maybe a bigger ship." Everyone laughed and the tension broke. They were still the same crew, still the same family, but something had changed. They had seen what they could do when they worked together, and they had felt how good it was to make a difference. Laura touched the crystal pendant and smiled. Somewhere out there, a little blue-skinned girl was safe with her parents because a group of humans had decided to help. The galaxy was vast and often cruel, but kindness could still survive in it. Kindness could still change things. "Set course for Waypoint Station," Laura said. "Let us see what trouble we can find next." The Starlight Drifter turned toward the distant stars and flew on into the unknown. And somewhere in the warm heart of the ship, hope burned bright like a small and precious flame. Because that was what humans did. They carried hope into the darkness and refused to let it go out. And sometimes that was enough to save the world. Or at least to save one freezing girl who had been desperate and alone, and who had asked for help with a single whispered word. "Please."